It says, what do you think of hand supported squat variations, for instance, Hatfield, Bulgarian split squats and normal squats, mainly using hypertrophy focus phase? Oh, one, we're just not a fan of them. Now, it's important to note that when we say we're not fans of things, it doesn't mean that we think anyone who uses them is a fucking idiot. You just have no idea about training. The way we go about implementing things, this just doesn't seem to make sense to me on the surface. I can't think of a reason where if you're using a squat variation, you want to start using your hands for support, which simply means you just have to add more weight to assume you're getting similar loading. Then you have to try and modulate the loading with your hands to assume that's consistent. And you have no real way of knowing that when you're using your hands, how much are you using them? So how much do you have to add weight? I know one of our friends was messing. He had a 220 kilo back squat and he tried a Hatfield squat for a max the first time he did it, and he did 250, but he also really hurt his shoulder, which is a minor concern, but it could be set up with safety reasons. And if you had a spotter or a good setup, that's not an immediate concern. Although possible and notable is you rarely hurt your shoulders on squats. It is something that can happen on Hatfield variations. But that concern aside, I don't really see the benefit of doing something that is making it less precise, the loading you're putting on your legs. And then as a result of that, you're not able to get the same outcomes you think you want to get, or you're not able to be kind of consistent with the outcomes you're trying to get in training. When we know, for example, how we implement squatting, we know pretty consistently what should happen and what change in performance we should see for sport when you're doing something like a regular back squat. To me, when you're doing something like a Hatfield squat here, you're adding in more variables that I don't think really make sense. There's just no real way of modulating how much your arms are working. And if you're doing a lower body exercise, then I don't particularly see how this is beneficial. Now, if you're using this for power output, which I think is what a certain amount of people are using it for, I'm somewhat agnostic to it. I could see why you might make the argument that you can move certain heavy weights pretty fast. But again, if your idea is that you're moving heavy weight fast, it's specifically for the lower body. So while you could move heavier weights faster, distributing the load across, I'd open the doors if someone did an interesting study, for example, or someone had a ton of athletes and they were like, look, I've done this with 100 different sprinters or football players. And for some reason that I can't pin down yet, every time they do it, their 40-yard dash is 0.2 faster in 2 weeks. He's certainly willing to open the doors to that. But as of right now, I certainly can't see a good reason for that. Now, if it comes to something like hypertrophy, what I could actually see possibly being useful here is that if you're really in hypertrophy phase and you can tolerate the fatigue and the short-term changes to your output from going to failure and even beyond failure, is starting with regular squats and then going to near failure and then getting a couple more reps with the hand-assisted squat. I could see that being quite interesting, and it would definitely take your quads and whatever style you're doing, or your split squat, further. So in terms of hypertrophy focus phase, I could see a combination possibly being a good idea, because then you could ensure that your technique is more consistent. You can ensure that you're staying more upright. You can ensure that you're keeping the load on your legs a little bit better. So in the specific cases for hypertrophy, I could see that being the case. Like when it comes to hypertrophy, it's outcome based on kind of whatever gets you there. And there's a couple of different ways of getting things. Whereas when it comes to being stronger, or when it comes to, well, being stronger and bigger, or being bigger and faster, or being stronger and faster, there's kind of more defined channels which we would go down when we're trying to do that. And there's certain ways we go about doing that, which are probably very aware to a lot of people if you've watched this for long enough. But if it's just hypertrophy and you're not worried about the short-term impact to your speed or your other lifts later in the week, I could see a scenario where you do like a set of 8, you're nearly to failure, you are using a safety squat bar, you reach out, you've set up and you do an extra 4 or 5 reps maybe. I could see that being quite interesting if you want to take things to the absolute max in that case. But in general, for the sporting application, I think it's, what's a nice way? It's not really, it doesn't really make sense. I think you're adding another variable that doesn't need to be there. And to be honest, it's not like it's not obvious that you need to lift heavy, have good body comp, do your conditioning, sprint faster. I know it's not obvious to some coaches, but there's lots of people out there who know that that's the answer. So there's nothing really that needs to be reinvented here per se. Again, I'm open to the fact that if someone was like, no, I see this all the time, and they're a good coach, and I have respect for them, I'm very interested to see if they have enough a sample group, or they just see it consistently enough. They'll be like, look, I've been doing this for 5 years and there's something going on there. But as of right now, look at it from the way we train people, I just don't see it being useful for sport. But again, maybe for hypertrophy, could be useful.
Yeah, a bit of extra volume.